If you're a B2B business, a B2B tech company, or a B2B marketer, you're in the right place. Coming to you from Studio 26, this is the Interesting B2B Marketers podcast, bringing you interesting contemporary takes, industry tips, guest interviews, and true stories from B2B marketers in the trenches. Now, here's your host, Steve Goldhaber.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Studio 26 and the Interesting B2B Marketers podcast. I'm excited for the show today. Jeff, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Steve. I just appeared on the most fascinating B2B Marketers podcast. The most interesting.
Well, we're trying to get an acquisition just finished. So in another couple of months, we hope to have acquired that one. But
no, it's
all right.
It's a great title for a podcast, and super happy to be here and happy to be sharing 2 or 3 cases with you.
Yeah, awesome. Great. Before we jump into the cases, let's just give the audience a 60-second overview of your background.
Sure, sounds good. So for the last 10 years, I've operated my own consulting business and had the pleasure of working with global brands, local brands, startup brands. Prior to that, I was Chief Communications Officer at DDB Worldwide, working out of the New York headquarters. And previous to that, I was the first Global Chief Marketing Officer for Interbrand, which is, the leading brand consultancy around the world. And I really got my start with Deloitte and Pricewaterhouse before it became PricewaterhouseCoopers. So I might be dating myself a bit, where I was working as a marketing consultant back in the late 90s. And there were a couple of industry jobs in between, but truly my entire career has been working with the C-suite and specifically on marketing and branding.
Awesome. Love the background. We're gonna have a good time on the show today. I can already tell.
Okay, I guarantee it. It will be interesting and fun.
All right, so let's jump into the first case study. This one is a platform that everyone knows about, although true to the spirit of the show, we will not reveal the name. But this is a company that was started in the B2C world, and they wanted to not migrate over, but they wanted to extend their offering into a business set. So give us some background on this one.
I think it's fair to say that this is a well-recognized global social network and you put it beautifully. They obviously had a ton of users, they had a ton of traffic, and they were looking to exploit, if I could put it that way, all of that traffic and all of their acumen that they developed into a business offering, primarily for small businesses. And this would be kind of similar to, if you know the company Shopify. So my client wasn't Shopify, but kind of similar offer where how can we use this platform to allow small to medium business size owners to use our tools that we were developing and also obviously access the audience that they had. And when we were introduced, and it was not only my company, it was a really interesting project in that there were 5 or 6 different consultancies or technology and professional services firms helping them out. And so we really had to coordinate amongst ourselves as to, what was our lane and what were we doing. And at Swystun Communications, my business, we were taking the brand architecture, and the product architecture that they were going for. So there were so many opportunities and directions this giant could go, and they had gone in a million directions and basically confused their target audience of, they were really going after like local hairdressers and barbers, restaurants, dry cleaners. We're not talking, Fortune 500 companies. They were appealing to businesses that needed their community being built and tools and technologies and things to get those people to visit their stores.
Yeah. So tell us about like the way to get there always fascinates me. Some companies are just, hey, we inherently know our audience so well that we're just going to have the agency or the marketer put together everything and implement it. Did they go that path, or were they more reserved and did more market research and testing?
No, they were really aggressive and wanted to get something happening fast. I think they sensed that even though they're this giant, that there were going to be companies nipping at their heels and niche players going to steal this type of business. So they were quite quick on decision making, which kind of surprised me. I thought we would be dealing with multiple levels and groups, but they were maybe committees, but they were quite flat and quick to go. And what we did was we took 13 disparate offers that they had and grouped them into one. We shed a couple that we didn't think were going to be commercially viable or of interest to them. And so, 13 different groups within their business became one, reflecting over 200 offers, which were then rationalized, grouped, and bundled. So not only did we look at them from a brand perspective, we looked at them from a product perspective to say, What can you offer? What can you offer well? What's going to make you money? And the big one was, what's not going to confuse your audience?
Yeah. Yeah. So what's the window here we're looking at from when they came to you saying, "Hey, we know we need to do this." How long did it take them to launch?
Once again, as I say, there was more than a handful of different agencies and consultancies involved with different skill sets. And I wasn't called in initially. I came in as a bit of a firefighter because even those groups that had come in before, they hadn't been able to navigate the culture of this giant social network too well. And interestingly enough, like a huge part of my role through the years has been facilitation, and strategic planning.
Rehearse.
I often say I don't have much regret in terms of my career, but I really would love to have focused on organizational design because that has tended to play a role in every project I've done, regardless of its nature. And when I came in, this was an organizational design problem. Not only what the client had and their business challenge, but this group of agencies who weren't working well together. So all of a sudden, I became the pinnacle person and agency to bring together the solution for the client, which included the rationalization of their business down to something that made a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
So it's always funny how once you get to execution, you see all these themes with org design and like, oh, now I get it. That's why these four different groups have, they have different agendas intentionally. It's not right or wrong. It's just how they're structured. So the ability to navigate that is always a good one. So when they actually launched it, since they had the scale on their existing platform, did they just use their own platform to launch it, or did they go outside and buy media or do separate off-platform marketing efforts?
No, they did do it through their platform and they had to actually mea culpa. So, I'll just go back to your first question because I answered the second one quickly as well. In org design, I often say there's, what appears on the organizational chart and there's how the organization actually works. And that's what I was able to go in and do and figure out quite quickly. They had been flubbing around for 3 or 4 months before we really got a work plan together that made a ton of sense. And once again, they were hot to get going. They were, really putting our feet to the fire to get to a solution. Like a good plan this week, better than an excellent plan next week. And I could say it was a very good plan. And if we had more time, we could have been better. But I liked the impetus. The impetus really got us going. But no, they had to kind of mea culpa to the audience because for 2 or 3 years they'd been floundering. They hadn't been doing as well. They had confused people, literally turned people off. And we had that discussion. We said, is this actually an external campaign launched through other channels, some traditional and some not? And they wanted to reestablish their credibility by doing everything on their own platform. And I actually applaud them for it. It worked out really well. And they had to provide some financial incentives. They had to hook people, in a monetary way. But we were very provocative in the messaging that we put out. And that gained attention and built an audience.
Yeah. What was the outcome of everything? How did their audience react and adopt to the offering?
We always say this in branding that you want to do this. If you attend any marketing conference or read any material, you want the Harley Davidson community. You want that. You want Starbucks as the third place to go. All those things that have been resonant throughout my career. We did build a community, and to cite another brand as a comparison, I was kind of emulating as I went through this process, certainly the strategic process with them, to emulate American Express's Open campaign, which is sort of
Yep.
that small business shopping thing, and really developing that sort of environment, community, look and feel, emotion to it. The one thing about B2B, and I would say this to your listeners adamantly, is that too much of B2B marketing communications is sort of clinical sales sheet, boring. And there is such an opportunity to inject great storytelling with emotion into it. And that's what we did on this project. And I think that made all the difference. It was appealing to people, who, this is pre-pandemic even, were struggling, as small business or medium-sized business owners to find the right tech platform to stay connected with their prospects and customers. And so it really was like a way to be a consultant to scads of businesses across North America and the world.
Yep. I had a chance to do some small business work in a former life, and it's fun. I mean, it was B2B small business, but it's very much a B2C play. And my lesson on that whole stint of work for like a year was just all about like you just got to find the pain of these small business owners, and if you can lead with the pain that they have and acknowledge it, then it's kind of like, hey, we know how to solve the pain.
It's so funny how I wrote a book 5 years ago now called Why Marketing Works. And I can tell you that there's not an insight in there that would cause anyone to go, wow, this guy's a brainiac. It's really a collection of 7 principles that are tried and true. And we have to go back to those all the time. We have to remind ourselves that as interesting and as complicated as, involved as marketing is in whatever environment, B2B or B2C, there just are some tenets we need to never forget and constantly apply.
Yep. All right, cool. We're going to jump into case study number 2, which is my favorite type of business, service businesses, because as a marketer, I love things that are invisible. They are the most challenging and the most fun. So let's take it away. Case study number 2.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And I think you've done a great intro segue. Since I opened up my own shop about 10 years ago, about 70% of my business has been working with services, professional services businesses, whether they be consultancies, accountancies, architectural firms, digital agencies, you name it, and even advertising agencies. So I come from that world. I'm known as a bit of an expert in assisting businesses of this sort. And this was my second client after I'd hung out my shingle. I continue to work with them to this day, which is a fantastic relationship. I've seen their evolution and nearly exponential growth. They were just injected with a ton of private equity. They're doing some really, really cool stuff. They're in space that we're still struggling to define because they're almost creating it as they go. So a great challenge for a professional like myself, but on broad strokes, they come from the loyalty world. In fact, their parent company, which they broke away from years ago, is credited with the idea of when you opened up a bank account, you got a toaster that goes back that far. When you cut your 50 years with the company, you got a gold watch. So, this company's lineage goes way back, but this was the Canadian operations and it broke away from the US parent because it really wanted to do some cool stuff. As it turned out, the Canadian entity was more progressive than the American, and they were beginning to compete for clients in North America. So it was almost making no sense. So I didn't know it at the time, but I rebranded this company from X to Y, and they have just exploded in the past 10 years. As I say, I've done multiple projects with them. On 2 occasions, I was their outsourced CMO. I love working with them. They're very complex, and I'm currently working with them now. They have 2 tech offers, 2 specific technology offers, primarily in loyalty, but you could say experience and customer improvement. Once again, it gets not nebulous, it gets broad. And that's the challenge of really trying to articulate their offer. But one of them is, a significant loyalty platform or engine. So we all have, they say, most North Americans have, or the average North American belongs to something like, 9 or 12 loyalty, clubs from brands. So could you imagine our wallets, right? If we had all of those plastic cards in them, and for years we did. So this one offer basically takes care of all of that. It manages each customer's portfolio of points, portfolio of interactions and touch points with the company. So that's a significant piece of technology that several major brands are using to power the guts of their loyalty tracking and business. The second technology offer that they have is pretty new. They launched in January, February. It's AI driven, and we're all scared of that stuff, but I actually think it makes total sense in the loyalty and customer experience area. AI will revolutionize this space. There's no doubt about it. So what this one does, if that's sort of the base, the one I mentioned previously, this one is the brain. So arms and legs and brains. And the brains here, I was taken through a demo on an existing client. And I just couldn't believe what popped out, in terms of anticipating the client need, providing copy for advertising, providing an idea of frequency of touch, providing an idea of benefits, promotions, deals. It's absolutely fantastic. So I'm in the process of developing 2 go-to-market strategies because these could be bundled together or sold separately, these 2 technology offers. And it's also got to ladder up, to the master brand or the overall professional services brand, because where they differentiate in operations is they're like a Deloitte, they're like an Accenture. They've got research and consulting services, and then they're selling their own proprietary technology.
Yep.
And that pits them against basically everyone out there. So they've got a range of.
So I'm gonna pick your brain on the go-to-market plan as you bring this to life. When I do these things, there's essentially hey, there's all the stuff I've learned in the past that I can just access. It's like a library of marketing learnings. And then for every go-to-market plan, there is the unknown. The category is reinventing itself. The marketplace has changed. As you navigate that process, where are you in that walking that line, between that I already know how to solve this problem versus like jury's still out?
Well, the secret in any consulting methodology is completing it. Because if we could run to a solution, which we all think we're the most brilliant, and I remember working way back in Price Waterhouse and reporting to the country managing partner for marketing, and he would say at the beginning of every engagement, I know exactly how many, back then it was a little bit about cost cutting in the 90s. I know how many people are going to be cut. I know how we're going to rejig things. I know that how much this is going to save them. And, the guy was shockingly accurate many times, but most of the time he wasn't. You have to go through the process. So I too, when I started this project, I was running to almost like Don Draper and Mad Men. I was running to like taglines before a strategy, right? I was thinking, oh, I'll have this licked and I'm going to work from the solution back and prove my thesis with the research rather than my research forming a thesis. So, but the difference between why I suggested this makes a lot of sense. The go-to-market plan we know was originally structured for new product and service offerings. But I actually don't even do traditional marketing plans anymore. I find them backward thinking, backward looking for sure. Oh, what did we do last year? Well, let's just pump up, this line item 10%. We'll take 3% out of this. We'll pump more into our digital. You almost get into an annual planning cycle that is dumb, that really doesn't have
Sure.
the fresh thinking or intelligence to it. If you can get into the mindset of a go-to-market plan for your entire business. And, there's two benefits to go-to-market as I see them, is they're forward-thinking and they're fast. So you're getting the results back right away so you can iterate. And the biggest difference is a traditional marketing plan resides in the marketing department and no one else gives a crap about it. A go-to-market, by its construct, is supposed to be layered across the entire organization, and that there's ownership or at least buy-in to it and everyone knows what's going on. And here we go. Thematically, we're back to organizational design again. It's really about making sure that your brand isn't siloed and that your marketing, in this case, the go-to-market, is a driving engine for this.
Yeah. It's so funny that you mentioned the budgeting process for marketers, right? Like when I worked for bigger companies, I'd say most fell into the following two scenarios. Hey, we're doing really great. Let's spend 10% more money. Ooh, we're not doing so great. 10% reduction. Those were the two marketing strategies that seemed to be pursued. That absolutely made no sense, but it was very convenient in the annual budgeting process where you weren't really upsetting anyone or taking risks. So I'm with you. I love marketing plans. When I was working at an agency, I once had a client that they just said, you know what? For the next year, we're actually just doing some internal rebuilding. Therefore, we don't really need anything and we're not going to spend any money. And that was really refreshing, not great to hear as a service provider, but I kind of appreciated that is to say, yeah, just you're doing nothing, spend that money now in different ways and then come back when you're ready.
I think what's changed in marketing in my over 2 decades, of course, is speed. Speed has been the biggest thing. And, we used to report quarterly and we'd look at a budget or a plan annually. And I had a real wake up call about 6, 7 years ago. I was working with now the leading performance marketing and advertising company in the US, just knocking the lights out in both revenue. It stayed independent. Everyone's tried to buy it. But I happened to be there. So they're performance marketing. They're working with hotel companies, the Expedias, Amazons, and where everything is that moment. And I happened to be there on Black Friday and Cyber Monday in their office. And in their office, which is beautiful, they have the ability to almost expand it twice its size because on that particular shopping weekend, given all their clients, they have individuals from client organizations coming in, sitting side by side with their folks and monitoring the data, right? Because that, 72-hour plus shopping cycle right there, I don't know what that's constituting for a lot of the revenue of some of these companies, but, you know, 4 days could be 12% of the year, it's absolutely incredible what's packed into those 4 days. So I just watched the speed of it. Now, from a creative standpoint, there's a lot being lost in the speed of marketing now. We're attracted to shiny new toys. We've got AI. I laugh and everyone goes, this is going to kill this business and do this business. And well, 10 years ago, we're talking about big data, and companies had reams of information. The visual is paper, but of course it was all digital. And what did they do with it? Nothing. They were inundated with data and they didn't know how to use it. So, shiny new toys are great. I love new channels. I love the ability to plug and play. But at the end of the day, you got to have something compelling, interesting, and relevant to say.
Yeah, I like that. All right, let's jump into case study number 3. This is another big tech platform who wanted to increase some awareness levels, make sure that they were perceived as a thought leader. So take it away.
Yeah, and once again, it's I'm sure your audience is brilliant enough to probably have guessed these pieces of bread, and the first and third cases here with the service company being the meat in the middle. But our third case, yeah, big technology company, already super established. Basically its name was in the dictionary, and yet it needed help. And I really enjoyed that. I remember being asked to come down to its New York office, which was kind of a secondary headquarters for it. And they had the most amazing commissary. I was so happy with it. They could have paid me just in meals. It was fantastic. And of course, a youthful organization. I'm older now. I was slightly younger then, but I'm speaking to a young woman in her early 20s who's got an amazingly important portfolio for the company. So here I am looking at her and going, wow, I wasn't even given responsibility to deliver coffee to the boardroom at your age. And you've got this significant position and accountability. And what it was they wanted to bolster their thought leadership program. And so, they had been known for, basically popularizing one piece of technology that revolutionized the world, but they were branching out and they wanted to be known beyond that one capability. So they had one actual print magazine at the time, and this wasn't too long ago. So I was surprised that they were putting it out in print. It was a thought leadership piece, and they were, due to their credibility, were able to attract, the Harvard professors, the top CEOs at major companies to be, providing articles or interviews. And really what we did was we put together an entire thought leadership program, not just this one pillar that was quite strong, but was too much was resting on it. And it was sort of cratering as a result. So, we built global content, not only by their services, products, and offers. We built it by country because there's a cultural difference, obviously.
Yep.
And of course, by subject. So I felt like I was building the Library of Congress at the end of this because we had this amazing matrix graphic and it had, frequency, audience, geography, subject, a big one, author, because so much these days with stuff out there, I've railed against this for years as a writer as well, that when you go on, what's the credibility of source, and people writing comments without using their proper names and all that. So anyway, I'm off tangent, but we had this incredible basket of power because their brand was so strong, the relationship so strong. We were building content that I would say in the aggregate was way better than Harvard Business Review, Wired, Fast Company combined. It was just astounding. It's faltered along the way because, quite frankly, they haven't needed to keep the investment up. They do so well on the balance sheet that this is more a nice to have than a need to have.
You set on a project like this to increase awareness. Like, is it as simple as they've done some benchmarking and they say, here's where we're at, and in 6 months, 9 months from now, we're going to do another readout? Like, what's the success metrics that you're set up to follow?
Yeah. So, you know what? This was not just a vanity project in my mind. There were some real tangible metrics to it. There was a performance marketing component to it that if compelling content attracted a person, an individual, or an individual representing a company to come in based on clear call to actions, and I was really firm in making sure each piece of content had that, that then if we could follow the customer journey to see whether or not they were engaging with this giant technology company's other services, then this was a sales tool. This was absolutely a sales tool. And we see it in professional services all the time. I'm an advocate of case studies, and we know it's so difficult to wring a case study out of a client because they're loath to give the consultancy or the agency proper due if their revenue goes up 9% or a product spikes or for a few
Yeah.
months. But a case study, any piece of intellectual property in a thought leadership program, it's not being written for ego's sake. It's being written to drive traffic and drive revenue. And what was so cool about this one is in its time when it was driving traffic, we began thinking about extra offers. So in this case, this big tech company built a product totally free. Two of these were totally free. Grow My Store. So, you're attracted in by a piece of content. How to lift sales on Cyber Monday, could have been the piece. Who knows? So you go in, and then of course you're providing links to other pieces of your ecosystem that you want people to go. And there was Grow My Store. So it was a really neat tool. You just entered the URL of your business. It analyzed your retail site, gave an overall score of efficacy and efficiency, and offered a fairly detailed, this is, really before AI took off, insights and recommendations to help strengthen the business. So not only are they getting great content, they're getting a tool that they can react to and scoring for their business that they wouldn't be getting on a regular basis. Another one they built because they saw the traffic that was coming in was this Insights Finder. So it was a way for small business to medium business, it could be large business, to gather intent-based insights of their audience, uncover search trends, unlock new ways to reach them. And they had great cases to share. Oreo used it, I remember, and had 100% growth in one product line year over year using the insights out of this free tool.
Yeah. Fascinating. I always love, marketing and content. We think of the written words or visual executions, and I just love the utility. Just give someone a really powerful tool, and that is just golden. I always admire the companies that do that. All right, we're going to close out the third case study. I should have a book closing sound effect added in production, but we're closing out the book. We're going to get to know more about you. So tell me about your first job in marketing. What were you doing?
It's kind of funny when you think about it. When you prepped me for this and you said, let's talk about your first job in marketing, I was going, should I go back to when I was 12 and I was a tennis court attendant? And,
yes, please. I need to hear the story.
No, it is funny when you think back to the jobs that have influenced you. And one that I'm going to raise that I draw on all the time, myself, two friends, we became partners in, we won the rights to, I'm Canadian, so we had this provincial park in my home province of Manitoba that could attract, in the summer months, 50,000 people a day to its beautiful white sand beaches. And we somehow, as guys in our early 20s, not knowing what the heck we were doing, we won the lease on a 300-seat restaurant and bar, beach concessions, and a store and some other little properties, the ability to put hot dog carts in key areas. And we were just out of our limit right from the get-go. But we ran it for several years, so got better progressively with each year. And I was both the marketing guy and the accounting guy. Me being, as was called the pencil, the accounting guy, was a complete wrong role for me. But the marketing was absolutely astounding. But what it taught me, and I swear to you, Steve, I still, harken back, it taught me about staffing. It taught me about resourcing projects because we could staff up on, let's say, for a July, we celebrate July 1, Americans celebrate July 4th, but it's basically the same weekend. We just had it. And it would be a long weekend for Canadians, and we would bring in a ton of food, obviously, in anticipation. We'd be looking at the weather like farmers, but we would never be able to guess it. We would staff up. So things like that, the fundamentals of business were ingrained in me in this because, sometimes we were chucking out $5,000 worth of hot dogs, 20, 30 years ago. We were having to send staff home and seeing the disappointing looks on their faces because there was either bad weather, just not enough business, all of those things. And then we got good. The summer months are short in Canada overall. We found ways to make every day we built it so it was like an amusement park, that there was something going on every day. And that was my marketing spin. You just can't expect people to show up if they build it. They will come. No. You constantly have to be offering some cool things to be doing. So I remember Sunday nights we turned into almost the best bar night because we themed it and we had a band in the 300-seat restaurant and lounge and just, experimented. And I think that's a neat hook. Marketing, I've said many times, I said it in my book, is a furious plagiarism. And that's true because we steal best practices from other marketers and companies. But it's also a huge experiment. And we have to somehow find license, room, budget, the will to blow up the laboratory from time to time. And, in my youthful naivete, I blew up the lab, tons of times.
Yep.
And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. I just find so much marketing now is me too, follow the tech. The tech drives everything. And, when was the last time you were wowed by, a marketing campaign, an advertising campaign, or even, a tangible customer experience? I
Yeah.
can't really speak of the last time.
Yeah, I love the story of how you got started, and I love just keeping it simple. And I always go back to maybe every couple of years I'll take my kids out and attempt to teach them about business or marketing. I go, let's do a lemonade stand, right? It's the most simple, basic product that exists, and you just are forced to answer all these questions that are so good. What is it? Just lemonade? How is it made? What's the price? Where are we going to distribute it? Like, it's all these fascinating questions. My favorite one is the pricing model that we played with one time, and we were reading some things online because I was telling them, hey, let's research. We're not the first ones to do this. Let's see what's out there. And then there was this whole zero price approach to lemonade stands, which was you just say you can pay whatever you think it's worth, right? So, and that had been proven to get more money because inevitably a big hitter would come by
Yep.
and just
Yeah.
throw a 5 or a 10 at you for the 30-cent glass of lemonade, and so it's just fascinating to see the kids react to it, and also obviously the excitement over when they start selling
The
lemonade.
big hitter would inevitably be me because if I visit the lemonade stands, I've written on this, just a blog on it because I too find it fascinating. There's the hot dog parable story about in 20 seconds about a guy who was a super successful hot dog stand through the years, sends his son off to business school. The son comes back, applies all the business school's learning, and ends up taking the stand into bankruptcy because he's tried to keep it too complex and not thought about, what made it successful in the first place. And I just love, I really think it's the small flourishes and touches in business. Once again, regardless of B2B or B2C, I remember a university prof in business teaching me that the one thing a gas station should do to differentiate itself is have the cleanest washrooms around.
Yep.
That's going to draw people in.
Yeah.
It's an old, piece of mother's milk or whatever, but I think it totally, totally works. There's the regional chain Wawa, that I experienced in the Pennsylvania, that sort of area. And people, like, they must have the most brand recognition and loyalty because of cleanliness, merchandising layout, friendliness of staff. And then, but the vast experiences we go into is, flickering fluorescent lights, chipped linoleum, a washroom you wouldn't send your worst enemy into, all these sort of things. And you just think, once again, back to the basics, folks.
Yeah. It's funny. The washroom story reminds me of McDonald's. This is probably 20, 30 years ago, and I don't remember the CEO at the time, but he takes over. Everyone's revealing like the big strategic initiative. Is it a new product launch? What is it? At the annual meeting, he just reveals it's washrooms. I am going to enable everyone with the products to clean, and we're going to have, we're going to put a sign inside. We're going to show the customer when we actually cleaned it, right? So you will have to sign off on this, whatever, 3-5 times a day. And, it was a strategic move to your point of, hey, if people on the road can associate, I have to go to the bathroom in, okay, why not just go to McDonald's? I know it's really clean. I mean, I love those strategic decisions that would never come from maybe a consultant or an agency because they're not sexy enough, right? But
Right.
they just make sense.
Yeah.
I love those things.
It's so funny that some had that secret sauce and then lose it. Howard Johnson's Burger Chef, at a time in the mid 60s, Burger Chef's revenue was more than KFC, Burger King, and McDonald's combined. they were the benchmark. McDonald's just basically stole every meat device from them, and yet they went out of business. And there's a lot of reasons for that: acquisition, merger, etc. But no, I think these simple stories are absolutely fantastic, and it's so much to do with training of personnel too. Once again, not constrained to B2C, B2B. When you think of the buyer journey of a prospect looking at, say, a chunk of technology from your company, as I'm learning with this on this project, they want to be educated along the way as part of the purchase journey. These folks are tech buyers, they're detail oriented, but at the same token, these two soft or technology offers that I'm attempting to represent in these go to market plans have to appeal to both the marketing buyer within a prospective client and the technology buyer. And that's something we forget too, is we just sort of blast out our communications and think they're relevant at a grand scale, and messaging has to be tailored.
Yeah. All right, we're going to play the love-hate game now. So this is
Okay.
a two-part question. What do you love about marketing in today's world?
That it is that never-ending experiment, and that it can always be done better, that it can be super exciting, that takes every part of the cranium to develop, left and right parts of the cranium. And, that when it works, there's nothing better in the world. When you see it work, however you define work, whether it's revenue, awareness, or all of the above, it's just exciting to see something take off in the marketplace.
Yeah. All right, flip side, what drives you crazy? What do you hate about it?
This over-reliance on technology has certainly been a bugaboo for me. I ask questions, three very basic, once again, no one's going to go, oh, wow, that guy's brilliant. Three basic questions of my clients, prospective clients, right out of the gate. Of course, the first one's around, what do you have that's unique or differentiated? The thing about these three questions is they tree off into hundreds of questions. Then the next question is audience-based. Who wants or needs it? Why did you build this thing? Why did you, think this thing was going to have any sort of traction? And then it's the third question that everyone is starting with these days, but is my third or 10th or 100th question is, how do they like to be engaged, that audience? And so I see brands, clients, individuals, agencies making the mistake of starting on that third question. Oh, let's just have a TikTok campaign. That'll do it. And then what are you saying though? What's the, where's the compelling evidence or the compelling reason? So to me, it really is, we're been so overwhelmed with shiny new toys that we start with that conversation. And that's what's wringing the creativity and the storytelling out of marketing.
Yeah, I like that. All right, final question. You spent a good amount of time in marketing and you've inevitably kind of said, all right, I'm going to go look back at my younger version of who I was. So whether you were running the beachfront resort or your first, W-2 job, what do you look back at and say, oh man, I was so confident back then. And looking back now, like I was such a silly marketer back then. What would you tell your younger self?
I think it would be focus on the human aspect. So I come from the consulting side. Focus on your team so that they're happy to deliver well. Focus on the client team so that they are receiving your very best. And I'll go back to the resort, the 300-seat restaurant that we had. There's that old restaurant or customer service adage that goes, you got to learn to smile before you can run with the tray. And what I see going on is we are in this speedy environment where results. We're all trying to run with the tray and we're dropping the tray and we've forgotten how to smile. And I think that is key to this. I would say to old Jeff or younger Jeff, if I was to go back, stick to the principles that made, things successful, these very basic things. We've talked about it. It's been a great thematic, Steve, throughout this. The 7 principles that are in my book, the hot dog stand, the lemonade stand, my 300-seat restaurant, bar and lounge. I'll tell you, if you can't find application from the lemonade stand to selling, a 200 million piece of technology implementation, there's something wrong because there's lessons between the two.
Yeah. Love it. All right. Well, I really enjoyed connecting with you today, Jeff. We're going to shut down the podcast early because, of course, you and I are going out and building our own respective lemonade stands. We'll set up 2 competitive companies. We've got a goal, maybe some seed capital, and we're gonna hope for some warm weather, because we all know that there's a correlation between warm weather and lemonade sales.
Well,
But anyway,
and that rich guy coming by and dropping the $5
that's
bill.
right. Probably today it's more about like profiling like nice cars that are coming by. Which block has the nicer car? The nicer car correlates to deeper pockets.
That could be. I saw a stand 2 years ago, though, where these 3 young girls, and obviously their dad had either bought it online or built it, but the stand was so damn attractive that I had to go up and marvel at this little edifice of commerce that was giving them an education they'll draw on for the rest of their lives.
I could almost see a performance improvement company just for marketers where, we do all these offsites with the proverbial trust falls and the outings. I would love to just say, you have $1,000, go to Home Depot, you're selling lemonade, and there's 3 competing teams, and you've got a day to do it. That would be interesting.
That's an excellent idea. I used to teach continuing courses at Price Waterhouse, and I'd walk us to the nearest mall and say, go into each shop and give me what's working and what's not working, right? Rather than sitting in a classroom. Oh my God, anything more hands-on, even in colleges and universities. We got to adopt a bit of the European apprentice programs for more hands-on learning. So I'm with you. Let's do the lemonade stand for big business.
All right, everyone. Thanks, Jeff. And thank you for all the listeners for watching another episode of Interesting B2B Marketers. Until next time, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Interesting B2B Marketers podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss an episode. If you found value in today's episode, please help grow the podcast by sharing with others and leaving a review. We'll see you next time.